one of the most humble things you can do is be the best version of yourself and recognize that everyone else's best version of themselves adds something that without, your life is not as good, your moments aren't as strong and as fun if you're not acknowledging the strengths of the other people around you, you being so uniquely, individually great, just like everyone else. Hey everybody, Jeff here. Before we get started, if you're getting value from the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For those of you listening on podcast apps, don't forget to rate and review. Your support really helps the show reach more people, and for that, I am truly grateful. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome to The Point. This is your host, and it is a pleasure to be here with you. You are a change agent. You are changing your life. You are changing your identity. You're changing yourself into the person that you choose to be on a daily basis. You're interested in finding out the nuance of your genius, the amazing person that you are, and how you're meant to show up. And today you're going to be able to settle in. If you don't have coffee or a drink or something, grab one. Let's get up into this and start talking about, the point of why we're here. So today, the idea of the show is to talk about, the way I have it written says the art of self-promotion, but really it's meant to talk about self-promotion. And I have some takeaways for you. You get to walk away today with steps to take to successfully self-promote. And self-promotion is not just about advertising or not just about Facebook or other things. Self-promotion is also how you handle yourself in an interview. Self-promotion through a self-learning journey. I will share that self-promotion is also about learning how to accept compliments from people. Even thank yous. If someone says, "Oh, thank you for doing that." "Oh, no, thank you for the opportunity," right? Rather than, "Oh, you're welcome." You can still say, "I'm grateful." You can still say, humbled, proud. Another thing, somebody gives you a compliment, just say thank you. Now, you might, something happened to me the other day, kind of a funny story. I got feedback that I needed to be cautious with how I was self-promoting, and a very specific instance came up where I was trying to, I was trying to overuse the idea based on one accomplishment, and I was using it to make a point. But the person said, you might want to be careful. I got feedback that was great feedback on a way to be more cautious in a situation like that. So that all under the request to help not be misunderstood. Trying to overcome that, I immediately, when was given some kudos for, look, you did a great job handling this process and walking us through this. Instead of saying thank you, I said, well, you guys did all the work and you guys are the real genius. I just did what I do, and notice how, blah, 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 blah. Small little things, when you really get into this, it really can sometimes come down to the small little things of what that looks like. But this topic's coming up today because in marketing and in advertising, in wanting to get the word out of what you offer, you have an opportunity to promote, to self-promote, or promote a product or a service or a change process that you're offering. And you want to be able to do that effectively and in a way that is attractive to draw people to work with you. And there's some keys to that go along the way. So some of the pains that I've had, the idea here is that can benefit you, and you'll never have to deal with those because you'll learn it here. Another side is that you're going to be able to understand key approaches and ways to move forward into self-promotion that's very healthy and that is attractive, regardless of your background or regardless of anything that you've done, whether or not that's difficult or not. Quick framework on the story with what's happened here that's led us up to this conversation. History on me is that there's always been an issue with saying I'm sorry too much or needing to self-promote, because I came from a very less than type of place. I was never very good at promoting myself. I was always coming from a place of trying to prove something because I was told I wasn't worth much growing up. Unless I was performing at a level that was high, very high level. It was never good enough. Nothing was ever great. So that on top of some childhood trauma that, we've processed and worked through over the years, and it's provided this opportunity to have a long history of struggling with receiving compliments and not to apologize all the time. So the turning point, I think, is that, and actually what made the biggest difference in clarifying all of this, and it's one of those things that ebbs and flows, that you go through phases where you're just in a zone and you feel great. And it's no issue to say, look, this is what you're going to gain. This is how this works. And it's going to be fantastic. And that excitement and enthusiasm can carry you through quite a ways. And it doesn't come across in any other way than exactly that purity of what it is. So if you're in a zone and you're doing that, think about how that feels and how good that is. This recent learning experience I had, because of some of the difficulties, had to do with hiring someone. So I had a mentor shared with me, it came at me from a couple of different data points of, you need to get better at self-promoting. You need to get clear. You need to get bold. You need to get out there and really sing to the masses. This is what I do well. And to do that, I hired someone I highly respect that knows me well enough to work on that process with me. And we jumped right in, and I got a bunch of content to work with, and we started promoting it. Now I made a promise that as we got this started, that I would not change it or fight back on it, even if it felt uncomfortable, that I would trust the system and the process and accept what was being posted so I could learn from the feedback I received, how it felt, and then find out what happened. And this was meant to be a process. So how many of you are working processes online that you're learning from that have to do with who you are and what you do? It's exactly what we were stepping into in that moment. One of the big turning points is, at the same time, I had shifted my focus, and there was pretty much an idea of being fed up with the idea of what anyone does of greatness, right? It's what anyone does for me, that they're selling, that they're always talking about what they're good at, right? So if you're selling something to someone and all you're talking about is what you do well, it's a miss. And that's what really came clear as I was in this process for the last few years now and really for my whole life, but the last few years has really been this accentuated process of, I don't want to any longer hear about what someone does well if they're wanting to provide a service. I want to hear what I will benefit from and what I will actually receive and be useful. Because what someone can be doing is phenomenal, and it could be something I really need, but if I won't receive it or benefit from it, if I won't actually do it. And that comes down to some of these older questions of, what's the best exercise you could ever do? And the answer is always the one you will, because the best thing you can do is the one you're willing to do when you're trying to move forward. And that's always a good place to start. But anyway, I digress a little bit. So I hired someone to do this bold content. They started doing this bold content, and a couple of posts came out that felt really uncomfortable, but I let them go. And someone gave me feedback on one of them that had to do with Starbucks, that I should be careful not to sound like Al Gore. And for any of you that don't know who Al Gore is, Al Gore was a politician. He was a vice president. He was a candidate. And he, in one of his speeches, he said that he invented the internet. And of course, that he got a lot of bad press around that. So in kindness and in all the right reasons, this friend of mine said, look, be cautious. You don't want to be thought of like Al Gore was. And I thought about that. And that's one of the reasons I was uncomfortable with it, is that it was talking about all these things that I did. Some more time went by, and that was in my mind, and I was starting to think about that. A couple more posts came through, and I realized one of the things that was missing the most in the realm of moving forward to self-promote and to practice self-promotion. I then again dropped this thought process and understanding of how people benefit, what they gain from what I do, and then also how specific that is for different situations. So in that case, it led, in Starbucks, I was a very small cog in a very large wheel, and none of that would have followed through and happened without all of the other players. without all the other people doing all the other things, it wouldn't have worked. But my very specific part was to work with the store managers, district managers, regional directors, and the vendors providing services to those stores, the team in Starbucks corporate that were working on all the systems and processes that make it real. And so, of course, I was integrating with them, but my real job was to help these vendors shift into what they needed to be. It was an entire identity shift for these vendors and even for the technicians, because it was an entirely different way of showing up. So my job was to help them get better at what they were doing and show up how Starbucks needed them to. And then at the same time, help the store managers learn and the shift supervisors and other people learn to receive them in a way that works, make sure all the system checks happen that allow it to work, that are different from what the traditional service call is. And then, again, help the district managers see a benefit and regional directors see a benefit, and then, of course, spread the information of the wins and the challenges and opportunities and keep benchmarks and all those other things. So my part, again, was small. I personally, because of who I am and how I'm wired, focused a lot on and always got excited when I was directed towards a vendor that wanted to work for Starbucks, that had a heart for change, that really wanted to do something cool and wanted to do something bigger that I could help develop into what we needed, which would then benefit them as well. And you see this idea that all things rise, which is right in the realm of things that excite me and has always been part of the dreams I've had for the world. So I got to really engage and show up in an excited way and do that portion of it, which I did really well. That's how that entire story of that first company I worked with that just catapulted and launched. And my part was this very small section of time that a lot of things came together just right for it to work. And most of it had to do with the desire of the owner and the team that was with him and the work I was able to do with them. So those are stories for another day. But in that post, the way they had made it sound was that I had single-handedly changed this entire industry. So I had rolled with it, let it happen, because those things weren't untrue. There was an entire identity shift. There's other perspectives to that, but there is now an entirely different type of work in these service companies that didn't really exist 30 years ago. So to me, that's considered an entirely new type of industry, and there's different training programs, and there's just so many things that have come from that. But again, how do we then identify my part? So what's happened since then? Well, since then in that story, I've ended up reaching out to some of the people I worked with at that time and reconnecting with them to talk about, what was your perception at the time? What did you think we were doing? What were your objectives? How did you see that rolling out, and how did that play into your career? What were you most proud of? Do you remember anything about me and my part in it? What was your perception of what I was doing? And one person has already said, man, I didn't think of any of that. We were just trying to create this work order system and this way of tracking all these things and tracking the assets. Someone else was like, oh, I totally get what we were doing, and I was working on this part of it, and it was an entirely different, it was setting a new trend of how to track assets and how to manage assets of all sizes for a multi-unit corporation. So there were, and I hope to meet with more. So that's kind of the storyline of what's led up to this idea. I really started thinking, so what is this deal with self-promotion, and why does it have to be so challenging? Well, it probably only has to be challenging if you have a big enough goal to want to solve that problem. And for you, you may be someone sitting here saying, man, this is easy for me. I don't see the problem. Well, and that's fantastic. But more so than not, what I'm meeting is people that either are confused about it. They're either going too far in one direction or the other, and have had a challenge or an opportunity finding the sweet spot of where you're talking well about yourself, but it's still humble. So in the realm of quantum strengths and what you get to hear about on this show all the time, one of the most humble things you can do is be the best version of yourself and recognize that everyone else's best version of themselves adds something that without you're less than. Your life is not as good. Your moments aren't as strong and as fun if you're not acknowledging the strengths of the people around you, and everyone really looking at all of those nuances that make you guys such an amazing group together, along the lines of you being so uniquely individually great, just like everyone else. Because the most humble thing you can do is to step up and do that. One of the things that happens for sure is you end up finding out all the reasons you weren't moving towards optimal, and you end up gaining compassion and understanding in your own steps moving forward. And whatever you feel, whatever you learn, you may begin to gain some compassion for others that aren't choosing to go down the same path of change, and go, man, I get why they might not want to do this. This isn't always easy. It doesn't always feel good. It can be uncomfortable. So that's one of the keys. So what are the three key lessons of self-promotion? First of all, self-promotion starts with clarity. When I stepped out and had this mentor encourage me to just have someone write my content, I did not have a great deal of clarity. They were driving the clarity for me. But if you can figure it, if you can really tackle that up front, there's a few key points. Really know what actually happened. Understand the actual facts. Break it down and tear it apart and look at the facts of what actually happened. And in the case I just talked about, that can be really muddy. There can be so many things that happen that it can take away from the clarity of what happened based on your efforts. So that's that next piece of how did you specifically contribute, and what did others receive and experience as a result? So you can break that down in things from your past and think about that. The next thing is to embrace the shared wins. Really look at giving credit where credit's due and making sure you're including all of the different parts and pieces. I had a good friend that was from this other company that said, man, all we did to grow and to expand the way we did was that we followed your plan. The plan you initially laid out and some of the steps to get there, we literally just went down that road. Some of the smaller points changed that were based on more intimate details that do change by region or by area or anything else, but we followed your plan and it worked. So I didn't follow my plan. They followed the plan. All of that hard work, all of that adjusting, the sitting in conference rooms, grinding through and diving into details that needed to be gone through, they did. That was the hard work they did, and all of the other things that they did. So I can clearly state the defining moments of the decisions I made, but someone also, the owner of that company also got to approve the decisions I was wanting to make. So practice receiving without deflections, another one. When you do something well, accept it, own it, and be clear on what it is, and move forward with the lesson you gained from that experience. Okay. Now, if you can do those three things, you have clarity. So if you can do that in the moment and actually catalog what happened, now I can go through a handful of companies now in hindsight and say, okay, at these 12 companies, these are what happened. These 4 major companies I worked in, this is what happened. Those stories are a little bit bigger and different. But then these other smaller companies, here are the pieces that happened. Some of the opportunities that I was working in that didn't go so well, what happened? What were my contributions? And really grading and evaluating what happened, but more so than anything, what did people receive is still critical. So that's kind of that. Man, you can be as good as you want to be. You can be as amazing as you want to be, but if no one benefits from it, I'm not sure if it counts. It's so important to know, first of all, what's special about you. It makes life so much easier. How to move forward towards your goals and actually make things happen in the most special part of you makes things so much easier and more effortless. But then how to speak about it, how to be clear that when you work with me, this is what you get. This is what you can expect. And here's how you might feel. And here's what you should be, here's what would help you to be looking for, so that when it happens, you can identify it as a win or as an opportunity. So one thing to be clear on, this is a really easy place to see yourself as less than you are. And just be clear that you're always contributing more than you realize. Okay. Ask others what stands out about your work. Anytime you finish a meeting, ask people, how do we do? And get a grade. So I just got introduced to the idea of the fist of 5. So you ask for a fist of 5 at the end of a meeting, right? If you're running the meeting, people get to hand a 5 is great. If they raise their hand and all 5 fingers are out, that means you did great. 4, 3, 2 is different. It's so good. If they give you a 1 or a 0, then it landed flat. It wasn't any good. But get an idea before you leave of how well you did. Always ask for feedback. There is no failure. There's only feedback. And if you get that feedback, you can then use that to move forward. Even if feedback doesn't feel good, it's always a positive thing to get it. So second win is facts over feelings. Be prepared in life to always sit down and look at the facts over the feelings, the facts over the stories that you start making up because of feelings, and wind it back down to the facts and describe your part. That helps you describe your part in a clear and simple way. Get rid of the stories that caused actions and do all that, and really look at things in a vacuum. Look at your behaviors in a vacuum. Look at the decisions you made in a vacuum, and own the ones you could have improved on, and own the ones that you did great, and own the results that came from it. So that's the other thing, because that's how you continue to hone yourself into a better, more effective person. So second to that, we've already covered a little bit, but results matter. So really focus on what others benefited from. In that feedback, take it to a next step. What did you gain? What will you take away from here? Are there any next steps that this is driving for you? And even much later, look for that. 4 is find your voice. Find your voice. It's okay to sound proud when you're part, and if it's accurate and you're grounded, it's okay to over promote, because you'll learn from it. But find your voice. There's a way to speak about things that fits for you, depending on the specific thing you're doing. If you're fantastic at hitting home runs in baseball, and there's stats to prove it, you can talk about that all day long and tell people how good you are and how many times at bats you have versus how many times you get a home run. That's a really clear thing. What makes you good at home runs? What do you focus on that actually you find when you connect, why you connected and what works? You can get really clear on that. It's a little different when you're in service to others, and it's up to them to receive and integrate. So the next thing is stay curious. Keep learning how your work ripples out to help others. Stay curious to understand and learn more, and always be improved. Always be ready to focus on whatever could be, little small changes could be made to be more effective. And if you do those things and look at yourself from a positive light, man, you don't have to go back into history. The encouragement here's an encouragement, is don't go back into history and belabor the things and just that don't work. Don't go back and just take the lessons from it and move on with the lessons rather than the emotions that come from the shortcomings. If you can take those lessons and focus on those in your mind and make those positive, then you're focusing on the good stuff, and you're able to then multiply on all the good things that are happening, because you know this for sure, that what you focus on is what grows. So if you focus on the feelings of disappointment or the feelings of failure, the feelings of letdown, rather than the lessons and what you've learned that make you stronger, make you better, make you more efficient, make you not have to repeat the same things over and over, right? You know which one you'll grow. So spend the time to focus your mind and your thoughts so that you can then use the best words when you're working with others. The key to having the best words with others is to really understand and manage how you're thinking and how you're talking to yourself, so that you can choose the most effective words when you're talking to others. So that is the lowdown. That is the point with self-promotion, and the point of talking about self-promotion today. It's one other thing that's coming up today is this idea of changing the name of this podcast. So we've honed in on 2 different potential names. I've got them written down here on the computer, so I'm looking down here. So we have 2 names we've landed on, and of course it's the Quantum Strengths. It's programming, but it's either the Mindset Reboot or the Becoming Project. And those would be and it would be a Quantum Strengths topic or a Quantum Strengths podcast, but it's the mindset reboot. So it's not going to be the point with Jeff Spikes or anything with Jeff Spikes anymore. It's going to be something in the line of either the mindset reboot or the becoming project. So if it's a mindset reboot, it might be the Quantum Strengths Project or the Becoming Project, Quantum Strengths Podcast. It could be the mindset reboot, Quantum Strengths Podcast. The variations, I think we can figure out on. But if you have an idea, DM it to us. Put it in the comments of one of the clips. I'll be sure to find it. There's a chance that you'll be getting a survey that you can just select what you want and maybe even add an option. I think we've done a lot of the option ads, and it looks like we've exhausted through most of the ideas of what could be new. But this is your show. I'm hosting it today. I'm hosting it now. But the idea is that we're going to bring more people here to talk about their strengths, talk about what makes them great. What is it that they find people actually are able to receive from them versus what they think they're great at, and overcoming these obstacles to designing the best you and moving forward in that in a consistent manner. So that's the point here today. If you're appreciating and if you're benefiting from the show, depending on what platform you're on, please like, subscribe, whatever those key functions are inside of the platform that you're listening to or watching on. If it's YouTube, like and follow, and let us know what you're looking to get more of, and we'll look to deliver. Have a wonderful, beautiful day. Be the best of you. Peace out.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. Please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.